Hello, Obooters from around the world. My name is Karis and I am 13 years old and I live in Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome to our Oboot Zoom session where me and my co-host Karis, who is 11 years old and lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, will be interviewing our guest change maker, Emmanuel Birba, who is based in the United States in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Emmanuel is from Martinique and is an expert in sustainable finance. His work focuses on investing in climate-friendly infrastructure projects that benefit communities in developing countries. He is currently back in school at Harvard University, but before that, he was working in Ethiopia with investment firm Meridiam. Emmanuel's work links to several sustainable development goals, especially to goal number 7, affordable and clean energy. Karis and I will ask questions to Emmanuel about his background, his journey, his work, his skills, and his impact. We hope that you will enjoy the session, and I will now start with our first question to our guest. Can you please tell us a little bit about you and what you do for your work?
Hey both, thank you for having me. It's really cool to be participating in the interviews. So for my background, I was born and raised in Martinique, which is a small Caribbean island, French Caribbean island. I lived there until I was 18, and after graduating from high school, I moved to France to pursue my study. I went to college and got a bachelor in physics. After which I had a master in finance before joining a company that is developing and investing in sustainable infrastructure across the globe. So initially I was based in Europe, in Paris, to look at projects in the Eurozone. And I think it was around 2015 we decided that we would export our model to Africa, and I decided to join that team. I went to Côte d'Ivoire to develop a university project there, and that journey led me to Ethiopia, where I was part of the team who led the financing, the fundraising for the first geothermal project in the country.
What was your childhood like? Your childhood like?
Oh, my childhood. So my childhood was very, very simple. You know, I was born in a very remote rural area in Martinique. My parents come from a very humble background, so I had a very let's say peaceful childhood, because I was really blessed to come from a family predominantly governed by love. So my sisters and I, we've been really blessed to have like a family circle that was very stable, loving. Although we didn't have much we actually could enjoy really, really nice years when we were children.
Okay. So this is a question. I'm gonna start off with it, but if you had a magic wand, what would for any problem in the world that you could solve with that magic wand? What would it be? It can only be one.
Any problem in the world I could solve with what? Sorry, guys?
With a magic wand.
Oh, I think I would try to address inequalities. Yeah, that would be the first problem I would try to address, because I think we humans found this magical tool that is capitalism, that allowed nations to generate wealth. But I think the collateral of that was the fact that this was never equitable, and with my magic wand, I think I would really try to find a formula for a more inclusive capitalism, so that more people could actually take part of the progress that is being made by society.
Who inspired you? What inspired you?
So it's a very good question. So my work involves coordinating a lot with public authorities. So what we do is that we develop and we finance and we manage public infrastructure projects. So what does that mean? If you are a public authority and you want to build a hospital, but unfortunately, because you've had so many expenses in the past, you cannot necessarily do it with your current financial standing. So what you would do is that you would try to go and interrogate the private sector to see who would be able to come to design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the project, the hospital. So that's what we do. We sit on the private side of this chain, and we respond to bid, procurement, public procurement that are designed to do just that. And in doing so, we obviously coordinate a lot with our public clients. So, for example, if the Ministry of Health in a country wants to do a hospital, they have a really clear idea of, or let's say they have developed an idea of what they want, what they need, and then they interrogate the private sector to see who would be able to provide that fit those requirements at the most competitive price. So, and as they enter into this dialogue, they obviously change their mind because, maybe there is some design specification that they hadn't talked about, which the private sector would be suggesting. And then, at the end, the result of that collaboration will be a project that both sides believe will be sustainable because it matches both sides' expectations. So when I started to work in that field, what I've realized is that it takes a lot of coordination with the public sector, but I didn't necessarily have a really deep knowledge about, how to think like a public authority. What are their constraints? What are their prerogatives? How to really understand their objectives, their preoccupations. So I figured that it was, time for me to acquire that knowledge. And when I looked around, I saw that Harvard was actually the best place to do that, and specifically the Kennedy School had a really, really strong footprint within the public sector. So I thought that I would apply in order for me to get that knowledge and be more effective in what I do.
So what are the benefits and risks to investing?
The benefit and risk to investment?
Yes.
Yeah. So the benefit, so let's start with the benefit. So on the infrastructure field, the benefits are like, if you take the public authority's perspective, is that you are able to attract private funding, private money to fund a project that will deliver a public service. And most of the time, you do have strong criteria in terms of the performance that the public asset will deliver. So, for example, if I decide that I would call the private sector to invest in a hospital, there's going to be a contract between me and the private sector. And in this contract, I will basically put all of the requirements that I have in order for me to make sure that anybody who uses this hospital will have a great experience, meaning that, there will never be power shortages, that the temperature in the room will always be stable, that, the patient will always have food, the water will always be, potable and of a highest quality. So all of that, I can do it while using private sector money. And I don't have to mobilize my own funding as a public authority. So that's one benefit. The risk are obviously in the construction. Throughout the life of the project, you have different type of risk that you have to consider. So let's say, for example, the construction. If you are the Ministry of Health in Tunisia and you want to develop a new hospital, if you find someone who tells you, you know what, I am able to build that hospital for you for $100 million. You want to make sure that once the project is done, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, the cost will effectively be $100 million. And not $200 million. And what underpins that risk is that, sometimes when constructing these kind of big assets, you have a lot of unforeseen events in the construction phase. So, for example, when someone comes and when the construction company comes and wants to do the foundations, they may discover, an archaeological site or other things that would disrupt their initial planning and their initial pricing for the project. So the construction phase of the project is really the one that attracts like the bigger level of risk because of the uncertainty. And most of the time when we look at these big projects, what we saw is that indeed they usually have cost overruns because of this uncertainty. So then once the project is done and starts operations, so let's say your hospital is built, the rooms are there, the surgery rooms are there, the cafeteria is there. Now you can start welcoming patients, and you have different type of risk, although a lower in magnitude, lower type of risk in magnitude, but still you do have risk in the sense that, something can happen in the life of the operations that can essentially disrupt the operations. So, if we talk about, for example, climate change, you may have a flooding. If you have heavy rains somewhere, and then all of a sudden your backup power system is compromised because of the flood generating by the rain. You don't have power, and if you don't have power, you cannot operate a hospital. So these are risks that usually you take into account at the very beginning of the project, at the design stage, to essentially make sure that you have measures in place in order to mitigate them.
How do you think you help the environment, your climate friendly infrastructure structure? How do you think it helps?
How do I think infrastructure help the environment? Okay, thank you. So I think infrastructure are needed in order for society to function properly. Everybody needs to go, or at least in the developed world, we have the chance to be able to do that, but to go to school, access good healthcare facilities. We need to be able to drive to work, so we need roads. We need to be able to take the plane, so we need airports. So these are assets that are absolutely needed for the society to function. Then the question is really, how do we make sure that these assets that we need have the least detrimental impact on the environment? And that is primarily managed at the design phase, meaning that when we do the design, the studies for a project, let's take our hospital example. We will make sure in the design phase that the building does not consume too much electricity, for example, that it is energy efficient. We will make sure that there's no loss of electricity, of heat as a result of, for example, a bad design of the facade, a bad design of the windows or the doors, these kind of things. So all of these parameters can be assessed and analyzed at the design phase to make sure that the asset that we need is the most environmental friendly. And that's how we go about it. We cannot, let's say, not do them because we need them as the society to function. But what we can do is to limit their impact on the environment. And that has a lot, that is being done a lot at the design stage.
Okay. So you chose to do geothermal energy. Why would you choose geothermal energy instead of all the other renewable energy sources?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So in fact, I think geothermal energy chose me because when I arrived in Ethiopia, and this is our approach in any new country that we arrive into, our primary objective is to understand what are the government's priorities. And we really want to present ourselves as a solution provider for the government. So for example, when we arrived in Ethiopia, Ethiopia has this big ambition to develop its power sector in order to support the industrialization of the country. Because you know that all the factories and all the companies, they need power in order to operate. So Ethiopia's primary objective when I arrived was really to make sure that they could develop their energy production sector. And the beauty with Ethiopia is that their grid, which is all the infrastructure that is providing the power to the houses and the offices, is fully renewable, meaning that in Ethiopia, all the power that is, or most of the power that's being consumed, but all the power that's on the grid is renewable. So they have a really, really big hydropower potential, meaning that they have a lot of hydropower dams that are providing electricity. And they have identified geothermal as an area of opportunity for them in order to get even more power. So what they've done is that they called the private sector to help them develop a geothermal power plant. And at that time, an Icelandic company came to Ethiopia to do surface studies, to analyze the ground, the site, and see where the potential would be. And once they finalized those studies, they needed someone that could come and help them to provide funding in order to implement the project. So they've done the studies, they had nice reports, but now that they have the reports, they knew what to do. They didn't necessarily have the funding required in order to start the work, meaning that you have to pay companies to go on the field, to fence the field, to drill wells and do this heavy work that costs a lot of money. So that's why they needed a financial partner. And at that time, we were in Ethiopia. We were looking for a project that would have a strong impact, and that's how we got involved in the project.
What are you outside of work? Like, do you play any sports or anything?
Yeah, so I play tennis. I played tennis since I started to play since I was 4 years old, so very young, and I continued until end of high school, then in university, and that's mainly the sport that I've been doing since I'm a child.
Why did you choose to do what you're doing right now for your job?
Oh, okay, very interesting. So I mentioned that I have a bachelor in physics. So, you would think like, oh, this guy has a bachelor in physics and then he did a master in finance. It doesn't really make sense to me. So the reason for that is after my bachelor was done, I didn't necessarily have a clear vision of what I wanted to do. And I knew that I didn't want to go into research. I didn't necessarily want to be a teacher at that time. So I decided to start working, and I joined a bank in order to work on their credit departments. And while I was doing that, I was really impressed. I had this light bulb moment when I realized that all of the balance sheets and the financial statements that I was analyzing were telling a story about the company. And I was very impressed that you could essentially tell everything that's been going on in the company, or most of the things that were going on in the company, just by looking at their financial statements. So I found finance very, very interesting in that perspective. And because I had a technical background, so I wasn't scared by the numbers. So I could, go through the numbers, understand, make analysis and assessments. And as I was learning, I really discovered the power of lending and the power of investing. And I decided that I would really like to be involved in the latter, investing. And I think there was, to me, a seminal moment when I met with someone that was working as an investment director in a fund, who explained to me what she was doing, and I remember being very impressed by by that job, and I was like, oh wow, that is really, really nice. How can I do what you do? How can I be like you? I was very, very impressed. And she told me at that time, oh, you just need a degree in finance. And I said, okay, which degree, what school did you go to? And tell me everything. And as she was talking, I was writing everything down. And a year later, I was enrolled in the same school as her, and in order to do my master in management and finance. After which, I found this internship with Meridiam, the company I currently work with. So that was, to me, kind of this succession of events. I had no idea when I graduated from high school that I was going to end up in finance, but it was these moments that actually allowed me to pivot and clarify my project, what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And I was really impressed by the good that we could do just by way of providing capital to projects or companies that are doing an important work.
What was the toughest thing you ever did, like working?
So to me, the toughest was definitely the development of the geothermal project in Ethiopia, because I was coming as a French Caribbean in a country where I don't speak the language. I didn't know the culture, and and there were a lot of cultural barriers at the time for such project to proceed smoothly. So that was very challenging, and it required me really to be humble, to listen a lot, and really try to understand what were the priority, how I could be helpful for the government, instead of imposing what I thought would be right or what I thought would be useful. I put myself in a listening mode to really understand what they wanted. But having said that, you obviously have different voices and different factions and different people with different objectives. So sometimes they don't necessarily align, and in fact it's really challenging to navigate this environment. So in the end, I've done it, but it was very, very challenging because it wasn't a straightforward process.
Okay, so I have one last question. And it is, do you have any advice for people who wanted to work like yours?
Any advice? I think just be curious. Be curious. I think when you work as an investor, you primarily are rewarded for your ideas and your ability to solve problems. And I think for someone to be able to do that, it requires a lot of curiosity. It's a lot of work. So be prepared to commit the hours and the work. But more importantly, I think be generous and be curious. And then be also willing to have an impact, a positive impact.
Okay. Do you have any more questions, Karis?
No question for me.
Karis, do you have? No? Okay. So, thank you, Oboot, for listening. Thank you to Emmanuel and Karis for the great discussion and for all the things that we learned today. Thank you, Oboot, for listening to this interview. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can hear about upcoming sessions with other change makers. Please also tell your friends about Oboot and share social media links with them. And last but not least, go to oboot.co to learn about opportunities to collect digital badges and help us plant trees to draw down carbon.